Hi, I'm Tom. I recently got married to someone really important to me, but our journey to this point wasn't easy. I want to tell you about how my wife and I met, starting from the beginning. We both got hired at the same company after college, and we're the same age. Her name's Margaret, but back then, we were just coworkers, and I'd call her Margaret casually. After our orientation, Margaret and I found ourselves working together in the sales department. We both pushed each other to excel, putting in hard work every day. At that time, I had a girlfriend, and things were going smoothly between us. Then one day in late April, my buddy Joe called me up. Joe and I had been friends since high school. Although we went to different colleges, we used to hang out occasionally, just us guys. Joe said, "Hey, I've got a couple of tickets for an amusement park. Want to double date with our girlfriends?" I'd never been on a double date before, so it felt a bit strange, but it sounded like it could be a fun experience. My girlfriend was also keen on the idea, so we agreed to go. During the long weekend, on the date of our double date, we met up at the amusement park. I stepped out of my car and called out to Joe, who waved back enthusiastically, saying, "Hey, long time no see." Despite knowing that we both had girlfriends, we hadn't met them or even knew their names before. Feeling a bit nervous, we introduced our partners, saying, "This is Margaret. Nice to meet you." When I saw the girl getting out of Joe's car, I exclaimed, "Wait, Margaret, is that you, Tom?" We both looked at each other and burst out laughing. It turned out that Joe's girlfriend was none other than my coworker, Margaret. "No way. I knew you were in sales. But Tom and Margaret, you work at the same company." Joe exclaimed in disbelief. It was such a surprising coincidence that all we could do was laugh, enjoying the moment like kids at an amusement park. Later, during lunch, they said they had something to share with me. Joe and Margaret had plans to tie the knot in June, although they hadn't set a specific date yet. They mentioned they wanted to wait until they had saved enough money for the wedding. Finally, on a fortunate day in June, Joe and Margaret exchanged vows. Margaret decided to keep her last name. I heard that since they got married, Margaret has been preparing Joe's lunch every day. I listened to all these romantic tales, but meanwhile, I experienced heartbreak when my girlfriend broke up with me that autumn. Ever since she learned about Joe and Margaret's wedding plans, she had been contemplating our relationship's future. I had been pondering it too, but her words hit me hard. "I can't see a future with you," she said. When I asked if I had done something wrong, her response was vague along the lines of, "It just doesn't feel right. Let's leave the past behind." I tried to accept it, but it was difficult to swallow. Joe and Margaret were there for me when I needed support and encouragement. Despite being newly married, they would invite me over for drinks to cheer me up. The three of us, along with other close friends and coworkers, started spending more time together. I thought this wonderful bond would last forever after Joe and Margaret's wedding. However, as the new year arrived and spring approached, marking our second year at the company, something unexpected happened. One Monday morning, Margaret was missing from work. I began to wonder if she was taking an unusual day off when my phone rang. It was a call from an old high school friend, sounding rushed and serious. Without preamble, he delivered the devastating news. Joe had an accident. I was stunned, unable to comprehend the words. "What? Joe, you must be joking. What do you mean he's gone?" The news hit me like a ton of bricks. The accident had occurred the previous night, leaving me in disbelief. Joe was sitting in the passenger seat of a friend's car when another vehicle, driven by a dozing driver, collided with theirs. Despite being rushed into emergency surgery, Joe tragically passed away in the early hours. I attended his funeral, unable to contain my tears as I mourned the loss of my dear friend. The harsh reality of his absence weighed heavily on me. Margaret initially held her composure but broke down in tears during the service. Unable to bear seeing her in such pain, I covered my face with a handkerchief, trying to mask my own grief. Afterwards, Margaret took a month off from work. When she returned, she had visibly lost weight, a physical manifestation of her grief. She approached my desk to express her gratitude for the emails I had sent during her absence, apologizing for causing any worry. Despite her smile, I could sense that she was still struggling. Margaret confided in me about the difficulty of coping with Joe's loss, especially during the lonely nights. She appreciated the messages I had sent, as they reminded her to try to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Even if it was just a sandwich, receiving an email from me motivated her to eat. Witnessing Margaret's pain, I couldn't bring myself to offer empty platitudes like, "I hope you feel better soon." Instead, I suggested going out for dinner after work to provide some comfort. Although she initially declined, citing her reluctance to socialize, we persisted in our invitations until she finally accepted. Margaret's appetite was modest, but seeing her enjoy the food and eat a little brought some relief to my heart. After dinner, as we walked home together along the dimly lit streets, Margaret began to speak about Joe. "He's in the cemetery now, and all I have left at home is his portrait. I feel so alone." Her tears flowed freely, and all it could offer was my handkerchief and a comforting touch on her back. Her grief over losing Joe was profound, leaving me at a loss for words. "I'm sorry," I murmured softly. "Thank you," Margaret replied amidst her tears, before resuming her walk. Initially planning to accompany her only part of the way, I couldn't bear to leave her alone in her sorrow, so I walked her all the way home. Once there, I lit a candle in Joe's memory. The room was adorned with pictures from the funeral, alongside joyful photos of Margaret and Joe. Seeing this display, I couldn't help but shed tears myself. "I'm sorry for crying when I should be supporting you," I choked out. Margaret wiped away her tears, acknowledging the frustration of their lost future. "But I have to keep moving forward, for Joe's sake," she shared, her determination shining through her sadness. I wondered how I could best support Margaret. All I can do is listen to her and take her out for meals, I thought, feeling inadequate. Although Margaret found solace in her work, it was evident that she was putting on a brave front. Despite the challenges, she managed to navigate through the first anniversary of Joe's passing, gradually reclaiming her spirits. Throughout this time, our support for her remained steadfast. We continued to invite her out for dinners after work, and I continued to escort her home. On evenings when we returned early, I would light a candle in memory of Joe, honoring his presence in our lives. As I escorted Margaret home one evening, she suddenly asked, "Why do you always walk me home?" Concern laced her voice as she pointed out the dimly lit streets. "I don't want you to be in danger if something happens on the way home," she continued. "Besides, if anything were to happen to you, Joe would be furious." She chuckled lightly, trying to ease the seriousness of her words. "I don't mean to meddle, but I feel responsible for protecting you, someone Joe cared about deeply. Otherwise, he might haunt me in my dreams, scolding me for not looking after you." Margaret's gratitude flowed as she thanked me, sharing in the laughter that followed. Time marched on, and before we knew it, we found ourselves marking the third anniversary of Joe's passing. Both Margaret and I threw ourselves into our work with renewed vigor. Despite the long and tiring days, we continued our tradition of unwinding over dinner with coworkers. One day, as we walked together towards Margaret's home, she hesitantly mentioned a small favor she needed. "You see, the light bulbs in my foyer and dressing room have gone out." I attempted to reach the light bulbs by standing on a step stool, but they remained just out of my grasp. Margaret, somewhat embarrassed to ask for help, finally spoke up. "Could you lend me a hand?" "I can't quite reach," she requested. With a reassuring smile, I gladly agreed, dismissing her concerns with a light-hearted remark. "No problem at all. Don't worry about the small stuff. I reassured her, earning a grateful smile in return. Inside her home, I swiftly replaced the light bulbs. Thanks a bunch. It's amazing how handy a tall person can be, Margaret remarked appreciatively. I jokingly replied, well, lucky for me, I can reach the ceiling. Otherwise, that would have been quite the predicament, huh? Margaret chuckled, sharing a memory of Joe's struggles with a similar task in another room. I laughed along, remarking on my own height advantage. As I handed Margaret the folded step stool, our fingers brushed against each other unexpectedly, and our eyes met in a fleeting moment of connection. The laughter dissolved into a brief silence, but I quickly averted my gaze, feigning nonchalance. Suddenly, Margaret softly questioned, "Hey, why are you always so kind?" Her words caught me off guard, and our eyes met once again. In that instant, my heart skipped a beat, but I remained silent, simply regarding her. "You're always there for me, always caring," Margaret continued slowly, her words stirring something within me. Before I could respond, she added with a hint of playfulness, "You're almost too good to be true. I might start getting ideas." A rush of emotion surged through me, but Margaret quickly dismissed her remark, attributing it to perhaps being a little tipsy. She moved to put away the step stool as if nothing had happened. However, I found myself unable to let the moment pass. Before I could second-guess myself, I reached out and enveloped her in a tender hug from behind. A quiet moment passed between us. I could sense Margaret's warmth seeping through my embrace, and suddenly it hit me. The desire to protect Margaret surged within me, transcending the bounds of mere friendship or coworker camaraderie. I realized I was falling for her, yet just as quickly as the realization dawned on me, a vivid image of my dear friend Joe flashed through my mind, causing me to reluctantly loosen my grip on Margaret. "Sorry, I think I might have had a bit too much to drink," I mumbled apologetically, attempting to diffuse the tension. Margaret shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. As she turned towards me, a solitary tear trickled down her cheek. My gaze drifted to Joe's framed photograph, and without uttering a word, I approached it and lit a silent candle in my heart, silently begging for forgiveness. "See you at work tomorrow," I murmured to Margaret before quietly departing her home. The following day at the office, we went about our tasks as if nothing had transpired. Yet, with every exchanged glance, an unspoken weight hung heavy between us. I suspected Margaret felt it too. This silent dance continued for some time, till one evening, as I escorted Margaret home after dinner with coworkers, an unusual silence enveloped us. Sensing the unspoken words that had been lingering between us, it came to a halt, and Margaret followed suit. Summoning all my courage, I finally voiced my feelings. "Is it wrong if it's me? I'd want to stand by your side in any capacity," I confessed, my words brimming with sincerity. Margaret met my gaze, and after a pregnant pause, she nodded in acceptance. "Yes," she replied softly, acknowledging my sentiments. But this was not the end of our story. On my day off that week, I made a pilgrimage to a particular place, Joe's graveside. It was important for me to share this news with him right there where he rested. "Joe, I've come to make a promise," I began solemnly. "I vow to make Margaret happy and to care for her just as you would have. Please accept that I'll be by her side. I promise to safeguard her smile, no matter the challenges," I declared, bowing my head respectfully before his resting place. As I closed my eyes in silent reverence, time seemed to slip away. Suddenly, a gentle, warm breeze swept through the cemetery, caressing my skin. It felt like Joe's gentle reply to my pledge. Gratefully, I lifted my head and met his gravestone once more. "Do you forgive me?" I whispered, seeking his understanding. Another tender breeze brushed by, imbued with a kindness reminiscent of Joe's comforting presence. Thank you, I murmured, bowing my head once more. I promised to honor this vow. I vowed to Joe before departing. A decade had passed since that solemn moment. Margaret and I had grown inseparable, living together in a partnership akin to a common law marriage. On appointment day after marking Joe's 13th anniversary, Margaret confided in me as we paused at a park after visiting his grave. With trembling hands, she revealed a marriage license, her eyes brimming with emotion. Embraced Margaret tightly, assuring her that there was no need for apologies. Remember, we said any form of us is just right. I reminded her, attempting to lighten the mood. Margaret's tears flowed freely, but she nodded in agreement, managing a fragile smile. Don't cry, I teased gently. I made a promise, man to man. I chuckled, diverting her attention from her tears. With renewed resolve, we exchanged vows and became husband and wife. 2 years later, our family welcomed a new member, a beautiful baby girl who bore a striking resemblance to Margaret. On the day of her birth, a meteor shower graced the sky, a celestial spectacle that felt like Joe's blessing from above. Our daughter brought boundless joy into our lives, filling our home with her infectious laughter. As we cherish our family and continue to honor our commitments, we find solace in the belief that Joe watches over us, content to see Margaret's radiant smile. And so, we embrace life's journey, living each day in a way that honors our loved ones and ensures that our family always finds reason to smile.